Are some of the justices ready to do the right thing and not the thing the far right wants? That's the headline. That's the title of my piece over at HartmannReport.com today. And it's about how the Supreme Court in the Alabama gerrymandering case just ruled in favor of black people in Alabama, essentially, saying no, packing and cracking districts, and that's what it's called. You pack all the black people into one area and you crack up the other districts and, break them up so that you completely dilute the power of black people in the state. This is something that happens in pretty much every Republican-controlled state, every red state. The Supreme Court ruled against this in a 5-4 decision, and the two people who voted in favor of democracy instead of in favor of packing and cracking were the two Republicans were John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh. Why? Well, there's a bunch of possible answers. I think, frankly, and Congressman Khanna referenced this in an answer that he gave to a question from a caller in the previous hour. I think, frankly, that it's because they've figured out that the public has lost confidence, has lost faith in the Supreme Court. And if they just kept doing things that were clearly partisan, clearly intended to benefit the Republican Party and screw the Democratic Party, independent of any kind of ethical standards, moral standards, constitutional standards, legal standards of any sort, that, they just can't get away with it anymore. This is what happened back in 1937 when the Supreme Court was about to strike down. They had just struck down the minimum wage law. They had just struck They had just struck down the child and the child labor laws. I mean, they were going after the New Deal, the conservatives on the Supreme Court. And in 1937, Franklin Roosevelt came out and said, let's replace all let's replace all of the guys on the court who are over 70 years old, basically putting an age limit, a mandatory retirement on the Supreme Court. And suddenly, Justice Owen Roberts, the kind of swing vote on the court, who had always been voting with the four horsemen, with the hardcore conservatives, suddenly he starts voting with Franklin Roosevelt. And he decides not to overturn Social Security and not to overturn the minimum wage. Why? Because public opinion had turned against them. Now, I realize the Supreme Court is not an elected body. They are not answerable to we the people. That's actually a feature, not a bug. You don't want the Supreme Court to be a political body. You don't want them necessarily to blow with the winds of public opinion. Generally speaking, you want them to do what's right. But what we have had now for the past 40 years has been nothing but a Supreme Court that has been dancing to the tune of the GOP. I mean, the last time a Democratic nominee was Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court was in the 1940s. There are 5 members of the Supreme Court who were put on that court by Republican presidents who lost the popular vote. This is not, this court in no way reflects American public opinion. And, I just said, it shouldn't necessarily reflect public opinion, but it has to. I mean, in a way, the court has to operate within the realm of the moment. And not the micro moment, not this year's moment, or even necessarily this decade's moment, but this era's moment. Yes, black people couldn't vote in the 1700s when the Supreme Court first was impaneled. Now they can. The court needs to reflect that difference. And it did in this case, whereas it didn't in the Shelby County case in 2013. So, is it that? Is that what's going on? Is it the court has figured out that they've got a credibility crisis and they need to clean up their act? Or is this just a one-off? Was this just, somebody on Twitter, I posted this on Twitter, and somebody on Twitter said, oh no, here's what happened. Brett Kavanaugh was blackout drunk when he voted. And by the time he sobered up, it was too late to change his vote. I doubt it. I'm not sure where this is going to go, and if we are seeing the beginning of a change in the court if Roberts and Kavanaugh are going to start voting more regularly with the progressives on the court. I'm skeptical of that. I don't expect it at all. It would be refreshing. The fact of the matter is that Republican nominees to the court tend very frequently to end up becoming more progressive as time goes on. I mean, Earl Warren, William Brennan, Harry Blackmun, John Paul Stevens, Sandra Day O'Connor, Anthony Kennedy, David Souter, they were all conservatives when they went on the court. They all became more or less liberals over time.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I think the reason why John Roberts' wife made $10 million and why Thomas is getting millions of dollars in vacations is to keep them in line.